With Austin Price, Brent Hubbs, VolQuest.com, a little 2-minute drill action. In Austin today, Tennessee had hopes, had expectations of getting to scrimmage. They're actually going to do it earlier in the week, and then they thought they were going to get to do it today. But the news of the day today is about who wasn't at practice, not who was at practice.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee, continues to have a ton of players who are not able to practice. And most of it, Brent, is not because of positive tests and more so to do with contact tracing. We've seen that at the lower levels of just elementary school education where so many kids are having to miss school because of contact tracing more so than they are the actual positive test for the virus. So Tennessee, has to set out, 40 some odd players today. That's tough.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if they were going to play today, they weren't going to play. I mean, 31 offensive players not out there, 44 total players. And look, Jeremy Pruitt has been really good through all of this, Austin, in terms of how they manage all this. But you could sense today there was a little bit of frustration, if you will, over the contract tracing. He understands that CDC protocol, but you could sense some frustration in not having his football team out there over guys who are in a 14-day quarantine because they've been exposed to the virus in some way.
Yeah, I said 4 players, Brent, have had multiple 14-day quarantines. That's like missing a month of training. I mean, don't tell me that don't set a kid back, especially if you're a kid that, hasn't been in the program very long. Of course, we don't know who those 4 are, but that's a tough ask for, basically to miss a month of training, whether it be practices or weight room. That's really, really difficult for those players.
Yeah, the other thing that jumped out to me as well, Austin, when you look at this is that also Jeremy Pruitt not elated with his defensive front. We sort of got a sense of that last week or earlier, the last time he was on a Zoom call. Today, he just flat out called the defensive front out and said they've been disappointing this fall camp compared to the offensive line. That's got to be a bit concerning with a potential game, some 3 weeks away.
Well, and let's face it, to me, though, it's tough to get a gauge on, is it because the defensive line is struggling or because the offensive line has actually gotten a lot better when you factor in that, you do have Trey Smith. And while Cade Mays is not eligible, he's still eligible to practice. And Brandon Kennedy continues to do good things. And Jameer Johnson continues to draw praise from coaches. So, to me, I think it's, coach doing more motivating, but there's also some worry there, because you don't know until you get into a game, is it the defensive line's regressed or is our offensive line just improved a whole lot?
Yeah,
I thought an interesting part, Brent, was the fact that he talked about the quarterbacks because they have so many people out. They're not, and I know that he loves to say they 2 platoon or 2 spot, but at the same time, he talked about how some of those quarterbacks are not getting the quality reps that they normally would get because of the amount of absentees from practice.
Yeah, but it also worth noting that Brian Maurer's been out for several days with a hamstring. As well.
We had that in the war room.
We did have that in the war room, but it's also noteworthy that he's been out because that's given a guy like Harrison Bailey more opportunities and
Sure.
more reps, although today they could not 2 platoon. Last thing as we get out the door on this 2-minute drill here on this Saturday, Austin, if you're Jeremy Pruitt, how do you figure out how to get a football team ready with the understanding that this contact tracing is not going to alter, it's not going to change? How concerned do you think Jeremy Pruitt and his staff are about getting a football team ready to play, and can they actually play? And we know the Big 12's put in some protocols about the number of bodies you have. We haven't seen that from the SEC. What's your sense within the program of where you think Tennessee is in terms of A, they're going to get to play, and B, how do you get a team ready to play when you got this many guys out?
Well, Coach Pruitt, bragged a couple of days ago that he thinks his high school background helps him in this regard on being able to see what guys could play at certain positions and play two ways in case Tennessee were to be shorthanded at a particular, position going into a game this fall. I think that, you just prepare as if you always have prepared. Obviously, much like the high school games that you and I watched, there was really no preseason scrimmaging. Even, the stuff you did inter-squad was not the same as you would normally do. So I think, until you finally, roll the ball out there and kick it off on September 26th, there's going to be a lot of questions across the board. And I think coaches are still trying to figure out how do we get our team best prepared, keeping us all healthy and safe.
Well, certainly interesting times. Lane Kiffin saying earlier this week that he knew of a couple teams in the SEC that would not be able to play if it was a game weekend. Tennessee would certainly be in a bad spot if they were trying to play a football game today. We knew this was going to be interesting and wild this fall. We'll see what happens with this Tennessee program over the course of the next week or so as we get closer and closer to playing a football game. For Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs, VolQuest.com's 2-Minute Drill.